Our next guest today is Jeanne Allert, founder and executive director of the Samaritan Women. The Samaritan Women is a national Christian organization that seeks to bring an end to domestic human trafficking through awareness, prevention, and advocacy. The Samaritan Women has trained more than 60,000 Marylanders on the issue of human trafficking in the U.S. Please welcome Jeanne Allert to the show. Jeanne, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mark.
How are you?
Good. Good.
This is interesting. The human trafficking, it seems like people are much more aware than they used to be of this, with this going on. Is that because of organizations like yourself, do you think?
Well, we'd like to think so. We continue to reach out across the region, really, to raise awareness. This is a problem that a lot of people don't want to believe exists, and so it takes sometimes some convincing that it is prevalent here in our neighborhoods, prevalent in our communities. And so awareness takes some time because we have to overcome that hurdle of resistance.
I have 3 kids and they are in organizations, and you're absolutely right as far as not knowing about what's going on. You know, I didn't know that in the hair care industry, a lot of the braiders are, you know, there's trafficking involved there. Sure. Even in the child care industry with nannies and people. So, you know, tell us, where are the most prominent areas where you will find trafficking?
Well, you latched onto a key component, and I think if you consider any of those industries where people go unnoticed, so if you think of, you go to a restaurant, but you never see the people behind the swinging doors. You go to a carnival, you never saw who set it up and who tore it down. You go to a big convention and you have no idea how that food sort of magically appears and disappears. And so whenever you have those situations for labor trafficking where people can be put into labor situations and there's not an accountability, there's not the visibility. We often say that human trafficking is a problem that's hidden in plain sight.
That's a great point. And so when we say human trafficking, you know, do the numbers support more women being trafficked than men, or not necessarily?
Well, it depends on how you look at the problem. If you look at the problem globally from the standpoint of labor trafficking, there are more people who are labor trafficked globally. But think of it this way, it takes more people to make a product. If you go all the way from the harvesting of cotton to the manufacture of fabric to the creation of a t-shirt to the silk screening on the t-shirt to get you that t-shirt in Ocean City, there were a lot of people along that supply chain, and so it takes more people to make a product. For sex trafficking, it only takes 1 or 2.
So tell us about your organization. You know, how do you find the victims? What happens? What's the process? So
our specialization is domestic sex trafficking. So that means that we only attend to individuals who are trafficked here in this country. They could be foreign nationals, but 87% of the population that we have served are American citizens. So trafficked in this country and then trafficked exclusively for commercial sex. And so we don't deal as much with labor trafficking, although we want to educate the public about that issue as well. So we are long-term restorative care. That means that we provide houses and programs and therapeutic support for the individuals who have been victimized in this way. And for us, that is a long-term process. Our program started out at being about 2 years long, but now it can go up to 4 years. We have 3 houses, and our annual capacity at full capacity would be about 40 women. We are a single gender facility, so we only attend to women who have been trafficked in this country. And so that's the work that we do primarily in the victim services arena, but certainly in the advocacy and in some new areas of actually helping to build up other agencies to do victim services as well.
You've trained over 60,000 people.
Yeah, we're busy.
Wow, tell us about that training.
You know, it's crazy. Just this last month, we presented before 12 parishes because last year we did a specific focus in the Catholic Church because the Pope is zealous on this issue, but it hasn't yet trickled down sort of to the parish level. And so we invited the women religious in the greater Maryland, D.C. area to come together at a conference to talk about the activities that they're doing in anti-trafficking. You know, those nuns are busy. I just want you to know they are no joke. And so it's been really exciting to bring them together, and then they've invited the parishes. And so as a result of that, we have had, like I said, 12 parishes that have stepped up in 1 month just to receive the training. We want to teach people about what human trafficking is. Certainly we want to do prevention work. We want to speak to parents. We want to speak to foster care. We want to speak to people in emergency capacities, because we believe if you see something, you need to say something. But our eyes are not always attuned to what we see. Again, going back to that hidden in plain sight.
That was a great analogy, by the way. What do we look for? What are some things that, like you said, we have no idea really what to look for? What are some things we look for?
Right. Well, so let's stay just within the realm of domestic sex trafficking. And in the United States, the statistics is that the average age of induction is 11 to 13. And so we're talking about kids that are being inducted into commercial sexual exploitation. Our average age of intake is around 21. And usually she's been trafficked 4 to 8 years before she comes to us. And so we are seeing that women have these trajectories of having been trafficked as children. So if we want to go upstream and look at prevention strategies, we have to look at truancy. We have to look at probably the number one characteristic of victims of trafficking is prior sexual abuse. So for us, that's 96% of our women were molested in the home or in the community as a child, and then that rendered them just more vulnerable to traffickers. So we look at prior abuse, we look at sort of an upset in the house. And so that can be things like substance abusing households, that can be abandonment, loss, being institutionalized. Foster care is an area where it's very easy to find vulnerable children. We look at truancy patterns and see if a child is missing for a while and then they come back. If they're missing for a while, they come back and they have gifts. And, it's not explained how those things have come about. Forms of abuse and signs of abuse on that child. You know, if you go back to that 11 to 13, that's a very dependent and vulnerable age. It's not hard to coerce a child into doing something.
Let's take a break. We're talking with Jeanne Allert, founder and executive director of the Samaritan Women. We'll have more information coming up on Game Changers. Welcome back to Game Changers. We're talking with Jeanne Allert, founder and executive director of the Samaritan Woman. And Jeanne, when you do the intake, you know, the process, I'm sure it's a long process. So what's the first thing that these young ladies need or that you give them when they arrive?
Yeah, I think it's an important consideration to realize that this is a national problem. It's a global problem, but for us it's a national problem. And trafficking disrespects all geographic boundaries. So what I mean by that is if we've been notified that there is a girl that needs placement, she may be coming to us from California or Colorado or from Florida. Now she may be a Maryland girl. So for example, we've got a Maryland girl right now who's been trafficked in the South for several years. They're trying to repatriate her back to Maryland and find placement. So we have to understand, first of all, we can't put these geographic boundaries and say, oh, well, I live in Howard County, so we should just deal with this as a Howard County problem. This is actually a national problem, and traffickers operate wherever there's vulnerability and whenever there's demand. So to your point, we may get a call from anywhere, Las Vegas, St. Louis, anywhere. They're not always Maryland girls. And so we get a call, we find out about her situation. She could be court appointed. She could be coming out of a drug rehab. She could be coming out of incarceration. She could be coming just as a result of a police action or federal law enforcement action. And they are looking for placement for her. Oftentimes, if it's court or case affiliated, they need her to sit tight for a while because it can take 18 to 24 months for a case to go to trial.
That seems very challenging.
It is.
Because, like you said, it's not necessarily a city issue. It's an issue that's a world issue, a national issue.
Right.
And so you kind of have to, you're aligned with a whole bunch of different organizations across the country.
Absolutely, yeah. And while we have to attend to this as a Baltimore problem, because there's some aspects of trafficking that is uniquely local, if you think street-based, is very local. Brothels, very local, because they have physical footprint. But other trafficking, like trafficking through casinos, conventions, sporting activities, those travel around the United States, and the individuals are moved a great deal. It keeps the victim very disoriented if she's always being moved.
So we talked about, signs. Mm-hmm. Can we talk about prevention?
Sure.
What can we do? I have 3 daughters. I'm sure people watching this.
I know, your
very
heart's
frightening.
palpitating.
Yeah. Are there things with prevention we can work on?
Well, it's going to sound simplistic, but it's really very complicated. Many of our women, as I mentioned, come from prior histories of abuse. And so I have often said, we've been doing this for 11 years now, that what we attend to from a therapeutic trauma perspective is child abuse. It's just that the act of trafficking was more of the same. You know, quite frankly, if you've been raped as a child for 6 or 7 years and then you get turned out in the commercial marketplace, it's more of the same. And tragically, some of my women will say, and at least out there I was worth something because at home I wasn't. So there's a great deal that we need to attend to in terms of childhood abuse, in terms of the systems we have that support children, training individuals to better identify when children are being exploited, making sure that those social services are in place for the families as well as for the kids. And so it's really looking at systems, which means it's not a simple answer, it's very complicated.
And when they they finish the process, what is their life like after that?
You know, it's been interesting to see. We added a graduate program because women come to us from all over the United States, and after they've been with us a year and a half, 2 years, they've left everything behind. And so they actually reestablished themselves in Maryland. So who would think that Baltimore would become the land of destination? Wow. But it really has, they will go into the welcoming community, and that's what we've become. So I would say for your listeners, that is a huge cry for engagement, because this is a place where they're starting afresh. And so when we engage with volunteers, when we have people who come in as tutors and drivers and mentors and helping them get jobs and establishing businesses, all of that says this is a place that's welcoming you. And we can do a lot of that.
Jeanne, give us the website.
So we're www.thesamaritanwomen, and it's women plural.org.
Jeanne, thank you so much for what you're doing. Amazing. We've learned a lot today, and you're making big differences in our community. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for watching this edition of Game Changers. I'm Mark Clark. We'll see you next time.